This panel's ready to go. Like, they're not waiting for the intro. They're like up on the stage and ready to rock and roll. So, building an outcomes-based DoD DevSecOps culture. That's the challenge. And I can tell you that I think I know every individual on the stage, and they are up for that challenge, and they know what to do, and they know how to do it. They have implemented it. They understand it. So again, like I said earlier, you kind of get out what you put in. There'll be some great dialogue and some great conversation going on here. It's going to be moderated by Aaron Swain. He's our Director of Digital Transformation at VMware, a practitioner, been in the special operations community and has done it before. So everyone on this stage has done it before. They understand it. So I'm looking forward to this dialogue and this conversation. So Aaron, it's over to you.
All right, thanks, Pat. I'm really excited to be here today talking about what I'm very passionate about, and that's outcomes. You know, sitting here, listening to all the panels, I heard innovation tons of times, and like innovation is great, but I don't know, I'm in this business because it's the outcomes at the end of the innovation, and I think that's what we're going to talk about today. Is like, how do you actually do that? With three people here who have actually done that, they know what outcomes feel like, they've done it before, and here to kind of share that special sauce with all of you is why we put them on the panel up on the stage today. So. I think everyone probably knows you already, but maybe I'll introduce you. Mr. Paul Puckett, the Director of the Army's Enterprise Cloud Management Agency. Colonel Jen Krolikowski is the Chief Information Officer at U.S. Space Systems Command, formerly the Chief Material Leader at Kobayashi Maru, one of the space software factories. And then Colonel Brian Beachkofski, the Commander at the United States Air Force, Kessel Run. So power-packed panel. And we're going to jump right into it and try to keep upbeat and interesting. So that my first kind of topic here is like, what the hell is an outcome? Use examples. What does it feel like to actually deliver an outcome in what is probably the hardest space to do it, the United States government?
I'll start. One of the skis.
One of the skis.
Yeah, so let me give a great example of when we delivered an outcome when it really mattered. August 24th, 2021, we were starting off the real peak of the non-combatant evacuation out of Kabul. And our software is being used at the 609th at Qatar for doing the air planning for AFCENT. And we had been using our suite there for about, since June, so about three months prior to that, for every mission in the AOR. But we knew that there would be an issue with scaling up to about 5 times their daily count. Well, the NEO was actually about 10 times their daily mission count. And the way we had originally built it, there was issues with the front-end, back-end communications. And what was happening is it was creating a pretty significant latency, about 5 minutes to load the application Slapshot. We called an outage. Our SRE teams, our dev teams, and our IT operations team all came together. We're able to identify and confirm exactly what was going wrong. Make changes to the code to be able to make thinner slices in the theater to be able to address that scaling issue. Commit additional store compute resources and instances to Slapshot to be able to handle the additional workload, and got it all the way through our pipelines and back into prod within 12 hours. So that evening, we got it all checked out with the 609th, that it was back up working with 2 to 3 second load time. And the next morning, they were doing the full mission plan on Slapshot again at the same mission count that shut it down the day before. So being able to be, hey, thanks. That is an outcome, right? That is mission success, is when you're actually delivering software at the speed of relevance to the warfighters that need that in the field that time. The world will not wait for our backlog. The world will change at this timeline that it needs to. And unless you have the ability to respond at that same timeline, you're going to fail your users. So that's what an outcome looks like to me.
Amen.
Yeah, so actually piggybacking, and I apologize I've been talking a lot the last couple of days, and so my voice is a little uncooperative, but so to piggyback on that too, we actually helped support the same effort, but in a different capacity through Kobayashi Maru. Part of the architecture we have in there is the data layer and trying to integrate and pull in a lot of different disparate data sources that people wouldn't normally think about using, or that you would think that you need to combine in order to be able to answer questions that you have or to gain knowledge that you need. And so part of that backbone when we were there was also used for the evacuation, and subsequently when all of the refugees were in country in the U.S. To help manage and the base commanders understand like what the population was and everything like that. So it was actually within the time that things were kicking off to about 6 hours later, we were able to get a site picture and have data integrated between what was going on with the different airlift aircraft, what was going on with passenger manifests, what was going on with supplies that was all around the country for different areas, and how we needed to be able to get all of those things linked up in order to be able to best support to support the airlift. Connecting to the Department of State, to DHS, to like all of these other different organizations. And recognize, I didn't say space in there at all, but we actually did have some space work that kind of helped bring things in there as well. But an asset that we brought to bear in order to be able to save the 15,000 or so within like that first day of people being evacuated. That's something that we don't get that publicized very often, but I am super proud of the fact that we saved all those souls and the stuff that we were able to do. So that's an outcome to me.
I can feel it from over here. Paul.
Kind of in the same vein, there's a lot of work that we do when it comes to deterrence in the United States Army. There's efforts ongoing in the world right now when it comes to trying to keep people safe. And anticipating the need to support that capability, there's a team that had actually delivered our mission command systems leveraging cloud infrastructure. And part of a certain amount of foresight that existed is there's an immense amount of pain for the actual soldiers on the ground when it comes to the lead time to actually become operational and have maneuver. Be able to have a site picture and be able to safely navigate the world, and then also, if need be, to be able to react to the world in a kinetic way. And oftentimes, the capabilities that we field to soldiers today are very constrained in the resources, the computer resources that we have. So there's a little bit of foresight of, hey, we need the ability for global connectivity and reach back when it comes to mission command as a service. And just, the other week, quite frankly, the fielded systems died. And the team had actually had that foresight and capability for reach back, and so at no point in time did they actually lose continuity of operations. At no point in time did they lose the ability to maneuver. And they were able to leverage persistent cloud services running mission command as a service for their mission while they brought their system back online. So in the case of losing connectivity, they were able to still have the mission. And nearly the exact same scenario played out 3 weeks prior. A little bit of foresight over in the PACOM AOR, where we deliver a similar capability. And again, infrastructure failed them at the actual site. And at no point in time did they lose continuity of operations. And so when we talk about our ability to enable soldiers in the field that are in, I'll say contested areas and challenging areas, one of the worst things that they can be without is the actual data and services they need to keep their soldiers safe, and then also, if need be, to be able to support people that are trying to get out of areas of conflict. And so being able to deliver technology solutions that enhance the way that they fight, keeps people alive, it's one of those things where I was just grinning ear to ear when I got that information, because when we talk about an outcome, sometimes it's not necessarily an actual rounds on target kind of thing, but a major outcome for the United States Army is keeping soldiers safe and how they're enabled in the battlefield with real-time information and data to do so.
Yeah, all I can say is, damn. For those of you that know me, I spent half my career in the United States Army in the infantry, and you all are talking to combat leaders right now, but you're in the software biz, the IT business, the cloud business. Why is it so important for you all to talk like that? And talk about outcomes. Like, why?
Well, that's why we're doing our job. I'm an acquisition person, and if it's not delivered, it doesn't matter. And if people aren't using it, it doesn't matter. So why am I doing my job then? So for me, it's not like about, my personal worth isn't about keeping my program going and like trying to secure more. I mean, yes, I need to secure more funding because I want to be able to produce more outcomes. I want to be able to meet the demand signal that I have. But it's more about that delivery to the warfighter so that they could actually use something and either stay safe or they can optimize their processes and stuff. That's my whole reason for being, and if I'm not doing that, then what am I here for? So I have to have that connection so that I can put smiles on their faces and that they understand what's going on, or I can understand better so I can support them so that they relieve their pain points and they can actually focus on mission instead of all of the pain that they have because I've alleviated that for them.
I think we've all lived the pain of IT excellence and working really hard for metrics of IT awesomeness, and then actually seeing zero mission value actually delivered to a customer in the way that we do business, which it's infuriating. It's extremely frustrating to think that you've wasted so much time and toil and pain doing this thing, and then you see ultimately, our guesses were wrong, the capability actually was never used by the customer. I lived this back at NGA, worked one of my first projects when I first became a civvy. I worked for over a year and a half delivering this great capability, and then went to go be the site lead. And I walked across over to the Navy, and I'm like, hey, how do you guys love this thing? We've been live for 6 months. And they're like, it's a piece of trash. I was like, what? And I realized at that moment, no one had ever actually engaged with a customer. How is value actually derived for your mission? How do you actually do your job? And I became an expert in the Navy's indications and warnings and targeting teams practices simply because that handshake for how we were delivering capability had to be made in order for actual value to be derived. So there's this immense difference between potential value and realized value. And I think far too often the IT world thinks potential value is the thing that wins wars, and its realized value is the actual thing that deters and wins wars.
So I can answer that question very directly, and that is, I'm a G-Series commander providing a weapon system as a service to our users. We are differently aligned than a normal program office in that we have the responsibility to provide a war-fighting weapon system to the users. We engage with the users more like a maintenance group would than a program office. And our success should be measured on the degree to which the users have access and the tools needed to do their job. That is where our SLA comes from, right? Our SLA should be around, do our users have the ability to execute the mission on the weapon system we provide? That is a significant difference from the way program office and acquisition runs. There was a conversation yesterday around, are the departments correctly organized to do software? Fundamentally, I say no. Fundamentally, at the biggest division you have in the Air Force org structure, the major command, we have one major command for delivering hardware, and I say hardware, and we have one major command for operations. That model doesn't work for software because it is being developed, it's being acquired while it's being used. You need both operational authorities for the weapons system and acquisition authorities to add features to it. And we have that split. We have those two different authorities in policy documents. AFMC operates under Air Force Policy Document 63-1. ACC operates under Air Force Policy Document 10-9. And they will say why they own ops and they own dev. Pretty hard to do DevOps when you have 2 4-stars that think they own half the mission.
Yeah. You talked about some of the conversation in the executive summary yesterday, and I'll just keep going with that. I think all of us up here have the scars to prove that the DoD is the hardest place to be in the IT business. It's so hard to get into production. I'm curious, what are some of your biggest blockers, and how you overcome those things to do what is? I've seen programs die because they can't get into production. but you all have seen that. You live that. Blockers and how you overcome them.
I don't know that it's, oh my gosh, I don't even know where to start, because it's like I feel like I've been battling it a lot for the last couple, 3.5, 4 years that I was doing a lot of that work. There's a lot of it about education. Like, people don't know and understand this world or the language that this world has. And so then trying to go to decision makers that, they may, I've known one, he had a phone like 5 generations behind, like they sold like an iPhone 6, or something. And like, so there's just like real big disconnect, I think, sometimes. But then they're the ones that are making decisions. And when you're going through saying like, this is how software should be built, it's not how you grew up in procuring IT or what have you, but this is how it needs to be successful or to be able to deliver on relevance and those sorts of things. Like, there's a huge gap in the knowledge that people have and the way that it should necessarily be done. And obviously, the way Beach was saying, just from a 2 different MAGCOMs with 2 different 4-stars, and they've broken DevOps, from the way that the hardware is kind of built, or the fact that people, I had one program office that I was trying to work with. We actually built something at KN that had a dashboard to be able to do OpsCap, SysCap for satellites, that to see like how mission ready were they and were they going down and all this, that, and the other. And we had the program office that's responsible for that satellite system, and they're like, who told you to do this? And I'm like, and like, how do you even know what's supposed to do that? I'm like, we talked to the users. Like, well, who told you to talk to the users? And I'm like, how are you not talking to the users? I mean, they've been building software for 20 years on a system. They haven't delivered any of it yet, and they've never once talked to a user to be. So there's a lot of cultural and mindset and a lot of issues there that the constant education that has to happen with it, the way that our policies are set up, the way the funding is set up. There's a lot of things that the bureaucracy pushes back on to be able to prevent us from actually producing outcomes. But if you are willing to put the energy into it and take the risks for it, you can find ways to do it and then convince people to start adopting it. I mean, I know, and Oscar can attest to this too, when we were first starting to do this and try and do some user engagements with our customers, at the CSPOC, they didn't really want to talk to us. They didn't trust us at all because we never had delivered anything to them. And so it took us, like, hey, we can deliver. We did something in about 6 months for them, and they're like, oh, can you change this? And we're like, in 5 minutes it was done. And they're like, we were expecting that change for like another 6 months, So it's building that trust and stuff too, which is also takes time and a lot of manpower or like a lot of personal investment that goes and energy that goes into it. There's just like it gets frustrating, but like I have that energy and passion. I love trying to be able to push that and to produce those outcomes, but there is a lot of other people who are just still like trying to understand the language or just getting into it.
I think it's hard because we aren't designed for the iterative delivery of capability to soldiers in real time. We were just not designed that way. We're not designed that way from an organization perspective, from a funding perspective, from a policy perspective, from a process perspective. And I would argue, even from a people perspective, seeing the opportunity and the value of working that way. Like, I don't think that there's any person that does not want to deliver value for the mission. But when we talk about this iterative delivery of capability, a lot of people just don't understand it. And oftentimes they don't see themselves as an enabler to it, especially if they don't understand it. And even beyond that, for the last decades, we have poked people in the eye and held people accountable to metrics that do not essentially enable the way that we want to work. And so now when we start to essentially, champion and put people in teams up on pedestals that have delivered capability, we're almost like scrubbing at and the pain of people like, wait a second, like I've been held accountable to task schedule performance for the last 20 years. Now you're telling me like none of that matters and this other thing called value matters, and that creates conflict. And back when I was over on the commercial side and we've talked with people that are trying to do iterative delivery of capability, I would just prep them about like, listen, like coming out of the gate, it's going to feel slow, especially if you have dependencies across like numerous different organizations that hold a little bit of the piece of the pie to get to production, to get feedback from a customer. You've got to evangelize. Like you've got to like pull them in and like help them see a way forward. And if they don't want to be part of the solution, you need senior leaders that's going to accept some risk to move around some things. And even then, that's challenging because when you try to do it a second time, the narrative is, well, oh, you got waivers, you cut corners. Like that's not repeatable, so this thing isn't real. And it's just, it's from a people perspective on the team, like one of the biggest things that we hire for in my team is grit. There are going to be times when it's just painful. And that passion for the mission outcome, like that fire has to stay lit. Otherwise, your team is just going to get frustrated.
And then they fall
quit.
back into waterfall.
Exactly.
Or back into the practices of like, I know how to do hardware deliveries, and that takes 20 years. Mm-hmm. And so then there is no speed because that's where they're comfortable with, or like that's the timelines that they expect everything should be that way. And software's, like the beauty of software is the flexibility and the speed you can change with in there and the adaptability for it. That's what software is there for. And people need, like, I wish people would more embrace that because you shouldn't have to have a capability delivery once every 20 years or.
Well, like if your acquisition's like, well, how do you hold a contractor accountable to that? Like, it can be anything. Like, there are so many things that like we've again poked people in the eye for that we've just got to change the narrative of what the new metric looks like for what success could be.
Yeah.
Hannah asked a really good question of her panel, which is, what would you do differently if you could rerun you said 3 months, but I'm going to say a year for me, the last year. And this does answer the question of what's hard to get to prod. And it even ties back to what we did for the NEO. We had that known problem of how we've architected the front and the back end within Slapshot and Jigsaw, are two of our applications, was a known problem. It was probably there, Brian, when you were there, right? Like, that is a known problem that has been there for a while, and we didn't address it, and that's my fault. I didn't jump in and get down with our portfolio leads and say, how are we handling this problem? And they didn't solve that problem. We just let that tech debt accumulate, the design debt accumulate, and we didn't address it. And part of the reason I don't address it is I thought things that weren't important were. I was answering a lot of questions about needing waivers for hiring practice, for answering questions around what is the right construct for software factories. I was answering questions around what is the flavor of Kubernetes you're running in your platform distribution. I was answering questions because it's software you would never ask in a review of any other system. I've sat in a lot of acquisition decision milestone reviews. I never heard them ask a satellite builder, what kernel are you running on your bus? But we're being asked, what version of Kubernetes distribution are you running in your platform orchestration? And that's crazy. I don't know how we're answering or asking the wrong questions, and I don't know why I actually answered those questions and distracted my team to answer those questions instead of, how do we get out of the design debt that we've accumulated from probably the right choice at the time to deliver faster and get it out there? But you can't ignore design debt and tech debt and think it'll just magically go away. So that's what kept us from getting the right answer into prod, was I was distracted answering the wrong questions.
Wow.
But can I just say, you as a leader had to do that, because that's the only way to insulate your team from that noise, for that team to actually get after delivering capability. And again, like, why it's hard. And this is like, used to talk like this is the domain of leaders that are trying to create this space. And a leader can be anyone, but there's a certain amount of like shots to the face that you're going to have to take. Because again, we aren't organized, we're not structured for this. Like, we're not built to function in this way. And that doesn't mean that everyone outside is going to be like, how do I enable you on this wonderful journey? What are all the roles that I, like, no, you're going to get the opposite. Mm-hmm. You're going to have people that are trying to understand, but trying to understand so they can put it in a box and shape it and do something with it. Vice, what Josh said yesterday, nurture it, and a little bit of the chaos, and actually be okay with that. And therefore, it was your job to essentially deal with that noise. It's extremely challenging for a reason. It's because it's challenging, but it's not to say that we shouldn't do it. Like, we have to do it.
Yeah, I talk a lot about nurturing teams and unblocking those teams so they can get the prod, they can get the outcome, they can talk to real, warfighters and the capability. But let's shift a little bit to culture and why it's important. I got a chance to see culture when I was in uniform in the Army. I get to experience culture like I'm doing now on the industry side, and then I've got the chance to work with the DoD from the industry side and blend those two cultures together. How do y'all think about culture? Is it important? Why is that important?
Yeah. That's probably the first thing to do, getting in there is that people, your people are your asset and resource, especially in software. And if you don't establish that culture and what your vision is, and how do you enable them to run with their safety scissors, as I would tell my folks, then how are they going to get excited? How are they even going to produce and get excited about it and feel that they're tied or they're contributing and whatnot? And I know within the panel that enablement piece, so that they want to come to work and they want to be able to produce. And it was actually very interesting. When I first got to KM, I took over a system. It was called JMS, and the JSPOC mission system. And I did an intro survey with everybody that I did a 30-minute one-on-one with everybody in my organization. And I had one guy who was deploying to get out of the office. He'd rather get shot at than working on that system. And okay, that's not good. I had another one that was, he thought his job was watching contractors write acquisition documents as a government person. And nothing that was actually about delivering or what the contribution was. And there was always nobody ever wanted to work there. It was very, very hard to hire. Mass exodus all the time. Maybe a year later, even still, I get weekly calls about how can we come to KM? I want to be in that energy. I want to be able to work on these things. You guys are doing stuff I want to contribute and stuff. And that's directly because of culture. Our mission didn't change. We still had to do space command and control. Nothing in that part of it changed. But I think it goes into the environment and what was in, and so then people want to work hours and hours, and they're I have to kick people out, why are you guys still here? Oh, I got just this little bit more, and that's all because of the things that we do, and we value our people, we listen to them, and we want to be able to take the good ideas that they have and actually execute on them, not just push them aside and whatnot. So, yeah.
Culture matters most, right? Culture and incentives are probably the two things that matter. Create incentives to get what you want, create the culture you want it, and then, like Ronco said, set it and forget it, right? You'll get the outcomes that your incentives and your culture create. You have to be deliberate about those, and you have to reinforce them. It doesn't happen because you have a poster on the wall. It doesn't happen because you signed a memo. It happens because when you as a leader in an organization, whether it's me or whether it's a team lead, says ideas above rank, okay, we're going to pause before we make a decision and go around the room and hear all of the ideas of everyone here. It is through actions that you understand the culture, and it is not interpreted based on the way you preface a sentence by saying ideas above rank. Okay, let's do this. It is your choice on a minute-by-minute basis in your organization. People will watch what is accepted, what is promoted, and what is allowed, and understand what your culture is. We have to have a culture that doesn't just say we empower airmen, but actually believes that the person who's in the best position to run that team should run that team. So we have staff sergeants that oversee, that run teams with lieutenants on them. Just because they have the most relevant experience, they're the ones who can make that decision, and it happens. We pride ourselves in psychological safety. Personally, I think we fall short on that because we still see there are times when it's okay to speak up, and there are times when it isn't. You don't have the tech debt accumulated over 18 months and not address it and say you have psychological safety if no one says, hey, we really have to talk about that. So there's a piece there that we always need to nurture and bring forward. But decide your values, decide the culture early, and then live it, and make sure that the people working with you live it.
And it's not a one-time, like you said, it's not just like post it on the wall, like, you know, Heartsease or something, but it's like, it is something that you have to do every single day. It's a very active kind of work to establish the culture and make sure the actions are there behind it. And that I like to hope that my folks felt that they could run with their safety scissors. Like, don't come to me for decisions. Unless you think it's going to be something that's impacting another area, I will back you, you know, and if it was a wrong decision, that's fine. We have a cycle that we can course correct, and that was fine, and you learned something out of it. But you have to have that it's a very active, not a passive kind of thing that you have to exercise every day.
In the ECMA, one thing I was encouraged to do that we didn't do for a period of time was codify what we believe the cultural principles of the ECMA was. Thanks to BK. But the point of, I gave a talk on the Defense Entrepreneurs Forum about this. The hardest thing are the actual actions to follow, because we're humans and we suck sometimes. And we do things that we don't want to do that might be counter to the culture that we want to create. And it's something that, you know, in the actions that we actually demonstrate to others, like us actually applying to the cultural principles, whenever we do the things that we aren't, you know, cool with, is we have to hold ourselves accountable, no different than we want to hold the teams accountable. Like, hey, this is the culture and the practice that we want to have. And I think that's so important. And that means not just for the people that are within your culture, but also people that I would argue are counter to your culture, is you have to constantly demonstrate what you think right looks like, and create space and room for other people to join your culture. I've been part of cultures in this you know, kind of this world where we were the cool kids, right? And everyone knew it. We wore fun little pins. We were all so special. And what that actually created were just more antibodies, because we didn't give any space and room for anyone to be a part of the team. Understand it's just simply the way that you act and how you treat each other and how you work and get after delivering capability. Like, those are the things we care about. I don't care about all the noise along the way. And so I think one of the hardest things around culture is creating a world where there's actually space and room for other people to join you, and then set the expectation across the entire culture of how we hold each other accountable, right? To always demonstrate the principles that we want out of that culture and not the principles that we.
All right, I'm going to shift it a little bit here. You know, we're all technologists here. Technology it's so cool. You know, there are so many cool open source projects. There's so many cool gadgets in the startup space. And there's so many cool things that engineers can do with technology nowadays. You know, when I was leading my effort in the government, I had problems with keeping my kind of engineers on task because they got distracted with all the cool technology that they could do. How do you do it in your own organizations? Like, how do you balance that experimentation of your engineers into looking at new things while burning down a backlog?
So I think for us, we went through a transition when I came in, and there is not a single right answer to this question, because I think before my time, the idea of try all the things was right. We were trying to figure out exactly what the right model was for KR. We were trying to figure out who the customer base is, how it all fits together. But that meant there were a lot of little seedlings popping up out of the ground. And we had to be very deliberate about, are those little seedlings going to be groomed into big, beautiful plants, or will they be struck dead, right? And you had to get rid of a few of them. And that was difficult. I mean, it was very difficult. Some of those choices we had to make were large support programs, like millions of dollars of programs that we turned off and went in a different direction. But what that meant is it became very much clearer where our value is and what our contribution is to the mission. What is our mission? And all of the things that weren't pruned had a very, it was more clear how they fit together to the mission. So now when you're being distracted, you have a smaller set of things that you have to compare. Does this distraction fit into our plan or not? And now you have a very clear vision of where we're going, and you can use that as the rubric to say, does that get us to where we're going faster than our current plan or not? And that's a very simple question. If you're trying all the things and you have new things that pop up, answering, does this advance one of all the things? The answer is always going to be yes, and you'll get more distracted. But knowing your value, knowing where your contribution and your focus is the way that you can make that determination. Because it's a simple question then of, does this get us to where we're trying to get faster for the user, faster or better for the user than our current plan?
Sounds like kind of where you draw that value line at.
Right.
Yeah, because I always, when people, I love tech, I'm a geek, and I'm proud about that. But I always go back to, what is it you're trying to resolve? What's the problem that you're trying to find an answer for? What question or knowledge are you trying to gain? And actually, what's the workflow that you're trying to optimize or to accelerate or what have you in there? And then the tech falls out based on what you're trying to do in that respect. So if you're focusing back into, like, what is your problem? What are you trying to optimize or automate or those sorts of things? And it's not about the tech for the tech's sake. It's a tie back to, what are you really trying to go after and capture? Then I think that helps eliminate, excuse me, a lot of the chaff in there about tech chasing. Or people who are like, but this is what I want. And I was like, that really isn't going to answer your question. One of the things, we have one system, and it was like, well, you've got to decommission this system. And that was my requirement, decommission this system. And like, to what end? Like, why is that? And you need to just build me a system that replaces that. Well, then you're just telling me to build another one of those. Can we actually talk about what it is you're trying to achieve and the workflow, and what are you trying to get after, so I can better your mission, and then I can put the tech together based on that. And you don't need to tell me what the answer is, because that's what my job is here for, and I'll work. But they're like, no, you've got to just build me another one of these. And so I think when you get back down to what is the core root of the problem, what are you guys really trying to go after? You stop doing that tech chase or the tool chasing, and you actually it'll actually present itself very easily when you keep that kind of focus on things in mind.
It almost sounds like defining the outcome you're after ahead of time. Sorry,
Yeah.
Paul.
No, you're fine. Because it's the same. It's the same. I was just in Germany and met with the youth safety team. I met the CTO out there. I was like, hey, question for you. Can you define what a CTO does? What differentiates the CTO? Because I used to be a CTO on the commercial side. And essentially the conclusion of the discussion was CTO fundamentally understands the business opportunities, and can find the right ways to insert technology to enable and enhance that business. And oftentimes we think of CTOs as these, know all this wonderful great tech and super curious about all this great technology, but if you have no clue how to actually leverage that technology for the business that you're in, understanding the pains and constraints, the limitations, the opportunities that exist, you're just getting fun tech. When I give a briefing around what we're doing in the ECMA with cloud infrastructure, I'll say hey, I get two definitions of cloud. one side is like hey, my data's anywhere I need it, whenever I need it. That's great. The other side is there's great cloud infrastructure that looks like this and is designed this way. If you have great cloud infrastructure, but you're not leveraging it effectively for the dude that wants their data anywhere, it's worthless, pointless. It could be the most wonderful technology in the world, but you have to actually apply it to the mission. And so that handshake is critical, but it works, in my opinion, backwards. You have to understand the business and then understand the opportunities for where tech plugs in. And the people that become so obsessed with the new fun gadget and all the fun different thing, oftentimes is what Beach said. It's this distraction because of the fun new thing, and they lose sight of why they exist in the first place. It's to solve the mission. There's room in space for crazy research and development, this world of like what could be. But I've seen teams focus on what could be without even getting the first thing out of what is needed right now for the mission. And you lose essentially, you lose that value. And essentially the tech is irrelevant. Right
now, I'm working a lot to help bring digital engineering as a big topic and stuff like that right now too, right? And people are like, hey, can you give me an infrastructure or environment and help me be digital engineering or to be a digital engineer? And I'm like, what does that even mean? What is it that you need to digitize your engineering processes to make yourself better or better design, or what is let's have that discussion. Because they think, well, hey, just give me a cloud environment with Spark CA and I'll have digital engineering now. And I'm like, but what question are you trying to get after with that? How are you even going? And so it actually drives a whole different other kind of conversation so that I can provide them what is the right tool or what is the right environment for them to be in, which is a flip from what most people, I think, go after when they see tech.
Well, I think that's why we see innovation theater too. Not that innovation theater is wrong in and of itself, because there's a world that it moves towards, and I won't get into really bad analogies here, but there are people that see from the outside looking in, someone who may have had that discussion of why, what's the business opportunity, and then therefore they've leveraged technologies and tools and practices to get there. And someone from the outside looking in sees all the tools, technologies, and practices well, that must be the answer to my problem. And I've described it before in the DoD around innovation, where it's kind of from Raiders of the Lost Ark, if you will recall, the medallion, it's got two sides of that medallion. And essentially the Nazis burnt, just the one side of the medallion. They thought that that one side is all you needed, but there's that other side of the coin you need for that complete picture. And it's, again, what business are you in? What's the mission opportunity that tech is going to enable at the end of the day?
So I know we're probably done with that question, but I'm going to extend it. Because that's exactly the conversation that I hear every time I talk to someone and the words AI come out. The idea is, oh, we'll enable that with AI. And the question is, what? You'll enable what, right? What decision process are you informing currently with data that you could automate because you already know the outcome of the decision and are using data to inform that decision? So the value line of the decision is now below the commodity of AI, right? That is the question, not this thing that we do that's really an art of planning an air war. We're going to just AI that thing. For what purpose? What exactly are we doing? And if you don't understand the tech and how you get there, you end up spending a lot of money with people who are answering that RFI and RFP very well, but you don't actually have it well constructed as a problem so that the answer is put into your business processes.
Yeah.
I see Pat coming up here. We got a few minutes left, so before we... I'm going to skip to my last question. Now I want to open to the floor because this is not always an option we have with these folks. I'm going to ask one more, then we'll open up to the floor. All right, so you all have got a ton of experience of building software within the government. What are your top 3 recommendations you would make, either someone replacing you or someone else starting out on this journey of this, building software for the United States government?
Don't build something that industry already has done. Leverage the commercial world, especially in this. I know there's a strong desire on the government to if we didn't build it or if we don't have it, then it must not be right or something, or we should be the leading edge on these things and stuff. I'm like, dude, the days are gone. We're never gonna surpass industry anymore on on things like infrastructure or platform. Like a lot of those guys have solved a lot of those problems or are already progressing more than what the government's probably going to push on these things, especially with the speed of what software and all those things are going to do. So like, let's leverage that. Like they've made the investment. Let's just buy those things and get over it. And, like use our value for the applications or the actual going after the problems and apply our resources in those sorts of things and not having to reinvent the wheel that industry does just because we're government and we feel like, we must be better than what is already out there.
I will build on that and say, focus on government-led integration. So if you can have the best-in-class service, we need it integrated. And the challenges will be is it's fundamentally at odds with the large system integrators business proposition. So let me flip that around and say, this is a massive opportunity for small and non-traditional businesses to come in. If the government does integration and we buy individual services and then integrate together those services, what we're doing is going directly to the suppliers that the LSIs usually buy up and then integrate in and sell at a premium to the government. Just from a business perspective, the government should not be going at the bottom of that infrastructure. They should be going at the place where the integration happens, and that's the high value margin that they're playing. It's a better business proposition to keep that excess value within the government. And it opens up so that the other conversation that was going on earlier, where we've had industry consolidation to a handful of large system integrators, you can open a pathway then for the smaller companies to get involved, because now you're buying individual services and can engage a wider base. It also means that because you control that integration, if you want to swap out a service for a better service, it's easier for you to do, and you're less locked into a particular vendor. If you buy an integrated solution, and there are many who provide an integrated solution, whether that's for a mission system or a data system, if you buy an integrated solution, you are locking yourself into that integrated solution regardless of what they say, because they'll always tell you you're not. You have to own that. And if you're not, you're selling away your core business to your vendor.
Well, that's where so one of the things we broke apart the tech stack so that instead of having one company buy or provide everything, get the best of, and not be great at any of them necessarily. Get the best of breed at each layer between infrastructure, platform, data, and applications. Go after those, and if they're not performing in there, you can pop them out. You can put them, get somebody else in it, or you can at least keep the tech relevant, as it works and evolves and stuff like that. I actually like to say the government is an integrator identifier. Like I don't want to do integration work. That stuff does not excite me. But I need to identify you two need to work together, or you two need to work together. Start to integrate your systems. I'll identify when that needs to happen based on the timelines or the work that needs to get done. But I don't need somebody who's the big, huge integrator, putting all that stuff together necessarily. I want to identify the integration that needs to happen when I need to have it happen.
I think this is a really complex question because there's a few different ways that it can be answered. I mean, I think at the heart is if we are trying to build a community and grow outcomes across the DoD, more and more people need to get experience in doing the things that we've been fortunate enough to be involved in the last couple of years. And I think that there are critical experiences for those people that need to exist. I'm very thankful that I had time as a contractor, as a civilian, and out in the commercial world, because those three pieces together, it is impossible for me to have any amount of success as a team doing what I'm doing now without those three different experiences. I think that that's critical. But I think really the most important thing of anyone is to have grit and to have passion, and to be humble and kind. Because at the end of the day, you're not going to succeed alone. And I think to your point of you don't want to be the integrator, but you want to be able to identify what two people probably need to be in the room together, is you need the ability to incite passion and grit across a team of teams and identify the right people and the right players at the right time to get after the right idea, set a vision and opportunity, and then create guardrails and nurture that team to grow. And more people need the pieces and experiences to do that, and that's challenging to do. But it's again, you just have to have you have to have passion, you have to be humble and kind, because that's the only way that you're going to find and build a community that actually is willing to, have some good times and some bad times, get through some really difficult moment, have some really difficult conversations, because at the end of the day, you're all aligned around that mission capability, and it's going to require all of the different pieces of that community to succeed, because no one person can do it alone.
Well, those are some really great recommendations. I just, speaking from where I am now, I'd say, partners and friends is how you get things done. Take it one step further. Pat.
Wow. I mean, again, words in my head: ownership, honesty, patriots, leadership. If academia is still in the room, if you need a leadership 101 moment, go back and find this recording, because this is what it's all about. Like, blazing that trail to do something that's hard and not let anybody get in your way is leadership. And that's what just happened on the stage. So great questions, incredible answers. I didn't want to get in the middle of it. Like, it was just, I wanted to keep going. So I'm confident there are some really, really great questions out here in the room. Like, every arm's going to go up. So there's a few microphones floating around. Gentleman there was first.
I worked on the second OTA, which is Other Transaction Authority. And Brian and Jennifer, I heard the call out about more involvement from small and non-traditional businesses. What are your opinions on disrupting the way that the government does business by accelerating agile aligned programs such as the OTA?
So one of my former things I did was I worked for AQC in a study on the use of OTA, and this was about 5 years ago. And in there, I went to an Air Force research lab. I guess I can't hide it. It's the Air Force research lab. There's only one. And I talked to their chief of contracts about their use of OTA. I said, "Do you use them?" And she said, "Yes, all the time." I go, "Great. How do you use them?" "Well, we take a FAR-based contract and we strike out the IP rights clause." And I said, "Well, okay, I gotcha." Here's the thing. You create a culture that says the FAR is there to protect you. You, as the warranted contract officer, are the one who's singly responsible if anything wrong happens. And you are the one person who can go to jail if this agreement is wrong. And then you say, and here's a new OTA that doesn't use any of the FAR-based clauses. Go out there, write anything you want, and it's okay. And then you wonder why the outcome is that they make a FAR-based clause and they strike certain things out of that. We need to change the risk tolerance in the culture and provide training so that we can use those in new and creative ways. And there are pockets where that's happened. Working with DIU, they use the Army Armament Center to be able to write their OTA contracts. They use, and then that went to DIU, and now Air Force is using that model. So there are these pockets where it grows up. We need to do more of that. We also, so I'm a reservist, and I was out at a nonprofit who did federal work before. The barriers to entry into federal work are far too high. And it's related to the OTA, but you're lucky if you get into a discussion about what contract vehicle to use, because that means you've already made it through all the other barriers. We need to find some way to make that easier, and if that's having an OTA or a consortium agreement and you make the barrier to entry joining the consortium, that totally changes things. So I think the OTAs have to be in support of the outcome you're looking for, to get it back to the title of the panel. Understand what it is. And if it's about, we want to increase experimentation with small businesses, then create the OTA for that and make it easy for both ends of the transaction to get in. More government agencies can participate, more industry partners can participate. If it's about, we're going to create C2 software, we'll have an OTA, and anyone who has a service that they want to make available, government person, like another government software factory can contribute, we can. Over time, program offices should become the governance structure of essentially an open source model, where contractors can come in and a proposal should be like a merge request or a pull request. And then the review is you review the code and say, this is pretty good or it's not good. if we had our RFPs be like, here's our code base and come in how would you improve it, that would be pretty cool too. So we need to answer that question of what is the agreement in support of, and then make the agreement easier for that. So that's my thinking, and I'd love to follow up.
He's not the project yet. No, yeah, so ditto. It kind of goes in, again, it's the contract and the way that it's put together that actually gets you to where you need to be. And, you know, the flavor of the day, yeah, OTAs make it a little bit easier to that barrier to entry. Absolutely agree on that. Like, I try and do everything I can to make it easy for non-traditionals to get in, but it's still hard. And so how do we actually get after those vehicles? And right now, like, the flavor is OTAs are like the easiest-ish thing. Right now, but I'm always looking and exploring, like, what can we do to make that even easier, because there's a lot of good ideas, but it's like, it's hard. When it takes 2 years to even get on a freaking contract, is that tech even worth it anymore? So I definitely wanted to work on doing that better, but it goes back into the outcomes of, like, how are we doing it and what can we actually put together in a good language so that we can actually work together in an appropriate way.
When we received our OTA, we actually had already launched our product. We thought the OTA process was over. And on demo day, this was 2014, we were the first Kubernetes in DoD. And we were demoing against, like, Palo Alto stack. So it resonates completely with I'm all here.
Yep.
Hey, good afternoon. Hey, Jason Dunn-Potter, Intel. So I have a couple things I want to quick say. Hey, appreciate you. I wanted to say I really appreciate the forum and the time here today, because I just put off the uniform last year after 26 years, and I got to tell you that watching what you do now, we needed you 25 years ago, right? I've been a huge victim of some of the software applications of the past, and I know you guys are doing great work, so please take a bow because you earned it. But I wanted to, you really, sir, you hit on my question really spot on. How are we partnering with culture, right, with industry partners? Because I did not realize that Intel has a small army of almost 20,000 software developers who are just maximizing capability on hardware platforms, who could be easily leveraged to modify DoD contracts. So we're working on that every day. But I really want to hear from you guys. How do we grow that culture from you to industry and beyond? Because I don't think the DoD is going to fix it by, you know, building a small army of airmen and soldiers that are doing software development. I think you're the break-fix action, and I love that, because you are fixing things along the way, and I love that you're doing that. But I don't think that's sustainable for the amount of work that you have. And I know you guys know that, right? You're already inundated with the level of effort you have. But I'm curious to see what you guys think of how do we become better partners? Like you said with the open source stuff, we're heavily embedded in Open API. We're heavily embedded in some of these already, you know, commercial industry standards. Intel is not, you know, we're pretty agnostic when it comes to that. We work with everybody. We put all of our stuff in everybody else's stuff. And so we're really curious to see how do we become better friends, I think is the question I really have for you. Thank you.
Do you mind if I take a first swing?
Go for it, dude.
There's a second sentence to this, but one of the best things that I ever did was quit the government. And it's because I got experience over in the commercial world and I actually understood like how the commercial world worked. And I've had so many conversations with retiring soldiers that would go out and like now join a company and they're, oh my God, I'm learning so much about how business is done, what this capability, like they're losing their minds now seeing like how industry functions. And they said, I would have done things fundamentally different had I had this experience prior. And we've talked about it in other forums before, making it easier to leave the government and come back into the government. And there are too many barriers when it comes to that. And I don't want to get into hiring practices here. But again, one of the best decisions I ever made was leaving the government. So I get that experience and actually see what it feels like over in the commercial side, how we're treated, if you will. And then, yeah, and then now coming back into the government, completely different conversations in the role that I have now because of that experience. So I think part of it is just, you know, living in each other's shoes, and I think more and more people need to get that experience. I think that is one way. I'm certain the others on the panel have better ideas, but I think just being a part of that community for a period of time is so influential and so changing, and then getting ways to get those people into more leadership positions in the government to then drive better partnerships. When I first started this job, I had my very first industry engagement. It's like, I don't want products, I want partners. Because we're about to go on a journey together where we don't really know exactly where we're going, and we're going to have to get through some tough times together. And the only reason I said that is because of my experience outside of the government working with the government.
Yeah, so whenever I talk with companies or vendors or what have you, like, because you're right, I don't have the numbers, I don't have the resources at all to do all of the work that we have. I've got to be augmented, but we own it. Like, that was another big thing, like, with all of my team, like, you own this, you have a vested interest, you are the government, you shouldn't just be watching people do work, right? So it has to be that part, like, you are an augmentation of my team, you are my team. And if there's a company that doesn't resonate with how I want to work with them, then it's not a fit. And so, like, having that exploration at first before you even start getting into contracts and things like that, to make sure that, are you aligned with how I would like to do business with you? And I will help you make as much money as absolutely possible, but help me also with my own business case, and we'll get along famously. So it's much about, like, how you want to work with them, and I favor that as, like, that whole team.
I just double down on what Paul said real fast, because I've been on both sides also, and as a vendor now, it's hard to be treated like a vendor. We make our clients most successful and they treat us like partners. It's that, be a real partnership with industry, as we should be partners with the government, is what I think is the special sauce.
Real fast, just a question there. I want to make this comment real fast. When I first started this job, I wanted to create an org chart that had everyone on the team. And I was told, you can't put contractors on an org chart.
Yep.
Excuse me? Like, I know by name, I work with them every single day. We've been through some stuff together. I can't actually put them on a picture because people are engaging with my office all the time. And they're going to be people that they engage with that's a contractor. How do you start to see and visualize your team and grow a community if you can't actually put literally a name on a piece of paper because it's a contractor? And there's a number of different, perhaps good reasons why. But we put so many barriers between our ability to actually be a partner in policy that may have existed for a reason at some point in time, but I think there is a different way that we can meet the intent of that policy without personal services that actually creates a community of both military, civilian, as well as contract personnel.
I actually want personal services contract. I joke with my lawyer that I bring it up like once every 2 weeks, that I yell at him why I can't get personal services contract, because I think it would actually solve a lot of the problems of not being able to give direct feedback to your employees. There's a lot of other challenges with partnerships where it is a contract relationship that would be solved if there was personal services contract. And I'll never understand why that's a problem. And I will go on that rant every time it comes up.
That's great.
Yeah.
There you go.
Bob Goen, Applied Research Labs, University of Texas. We support primarily the U.S. Navy and some U.S. Army. We've got dealing with millions of lines of legacy code in our fleet tactical systems. The recent Senate language on software foundries, the committee language, was pretty flattering on the Air Force and the Army software foundries, but less than flattering about the U.S. Navy. What advice would you give to the U.S. Navy to bring their software foundries along to maybe the state you're at?
Seems a little presumptuous for me to give them feedback.
I'm very biased, so I'm not going to even answer that question.
No, I'm not going to speak for them, but I'll tell you, I've had numerous conversations with the Navy where they're frustrated for how they're organized. Like, again, like, the moment of empathy for the people, I don't think it's people that are dumb or stupid or don't know what they're like. It's none of those things. There are barriers to actually getting a community to rally around and deliver a capability, and oftentimes it comes with how we're organized. And I just had a conversation with them the other week about this, and so it is coming to their aid of identifying the pains and the problems rather than coming with a stick of why aren't you doing the thing that the others are doing. I don't think there's any room in space to compare any of the services. We all have different cultures. We all have different missions that complement each other in the joint warfighting capability. Like, they're all different nuances, and we all have to come to the table together. And it's even why when we talk about the metrics of modern software development, is you don't use those metrics to compare teams against other teams. You use those metrics to essentially track maturity of a team and growth over time. And if something starts to stagnate, you ask the team, what's getting in your way? And I would love to see reports that says, we've created a coalition that says, what's getting in your way? We need more teams of people that are finding out what are the barriers. Because I don't think it's people that, they hire the wrong people, or they don't know what they're doing, or they don't care, or they're just slow. There are things that are stopping them. We need to stop that thing from stopping them.
Hey, you all know me, Brian from Rise 8. But hey, so I don't know if Hannah's listening, but I think this is spice level 10, maybe 11. So afterwards, you can tell me what the spice level was, but leave it to me to ask this one. Look, I think the software factories have created a ton of outcomes. That's what we're talking about today. But one thing that we don't talk about, and I think it's probably, so at least speak for myself during my time at Kessel Run, you're trying to protect your team from all the cynicism, and this is a slog. Like, it is a slog. But in trying to be optimistic and positive, we don't talk about some of the really big challenges. And I think the elephant in the room is that, we're here celebrating Army Software Factory. We go do these tours at Kessel Run, at Kobayashi Maru, everywhere else. And every one of those software factories, in fact, I would say that what I consider the top 5, I won't list them because that would be spice level 12. But the top 5 software factories that I see from my perspective in delivering outcomes are all under direct assault. Not just not being supported, but under assault, and not by the frozen middle, but actually by senior leaders. And so we don't have the champions that we think we have, even though we're producing outcomes. I'm curious if you agree with that, but also, what do we do about that? How do we can create this outcomes culture inside of our organizations, but how do we get it to take in the larger organization?
Is it a 10?
Okay.
I'll take a first swing. It was talked about a little bit yesterday, and Marquise nailed it. The senior leaders are trying to make sense of and put the software factory initiatives into a box. And that's not to constrain it per se, but like, oh, here's what it is and here's what it is not. Here's what it's doing and here's what it does not do. Here's what the next 10, 20 years look like for each one of these soldiers, airmen, or guardians, or sailors, and here's what it is not. And one of the reasons in our moment of empathy is for the last 20 years, we have asked people to predict the future, to eliminate risk, and to have something that we can program for and deliver capabilities within, let alone the roles and authorities of each one of the organizations that think that they're supposed to be doing that thing, right? And we all need to live in harmony. And it's, again, it's even like the frozen middle, or even your point about the personal services. Most of those people in charge of those acquisitions just went through training in a class and a number of different things of all of the horrible things that are going to happen to you unless you do these things. And it's no different for our senior leaders who have grown up in that entire domain for how we communicate with the Hill, how we create space and room for the services. And that's really hard to do. That's really hard to do. And the step back moment has to be for the senior leaders as well as for the software factory initiatives to find a way to give them that thing that they need to create a little bit of structure and make sense of some things, but then be okay with some chaos. When we talk about small tries, just for small wins or small failures, if you're like learn quickly, all those fun things is oftentimes in this business at the senior leader level, there are no learn quickly, fail fast moments. That's not how it feels. And so I think we need to have a bit of a moment of empathy for those leaders and how things are done. And that being said, it's just being cool with a little bit of chaos. Like I would argue one of the reasons why our community around cloudy stuff has been successful is because I'm almost clueless when it comes to the roles and responsibilities of different organizations. So I don't know who I'm poking at. And most senior leaders are not that ignorant as me. And we know whose roles we're encroaching on. And we don't want to do that. And everyone to a degree has got to be cool with a little bit of chaos. And a little bit of duplication of effort, if you will, as we trying to make sense of it, especially for the last conversation, the role of internal soldiers and civilians with external contractors and what that relationship looked like. Vendors, and integrators are in the same way. What does this mean for my business? And they've got people talking on the Hill that are trying to make sense of it, right? So there's a lot of empathy to be had in that space as to why they're under direct assault, because I would agree with you, that perception, there are a number of pieces of evidence that validate that perception.
Yeah, for sure. I have the scars. I know. I had a lot of energy actually taken from me personally in battling a lot of the attacks and stuff, which to me was like, but dude, I'm helping. I'm like doing what you want me to do, and yet you're yelling at me for being successful, which is very frustrating. But I also try and remember, I can see how it can be threatening, because there's a lot of people. Think about the jobs that you don't need anymore, or the people like I've been doing this one thing for the last 20, 30 years, and now because you either automated it or you I'm not going to you for approval anymore because I'm just making the decisions at my lower level. Like it makes them no longer have a job or value that they see themselves in, and so then it's threatening to them, and so then of course they're going to attack because they want to keep their job, or they don't want to be retrained, or whatever it is, to bring the value someplace else. And it's hard. People don't like change typically, and it's hard to live in the squishy, but still having yes, I do find value in you. It may not be in this job, but I need you for this thing, and you are still a valuable person, I think might help with some of that. But again, that goes back into the conversations and saying, I'm not here, I'm not attacking you personally. It's like, we can't operate this way anymore. And help me then change that so that we can get into a better position so we aren't lagging behind. And what would you like to do? I always ask my folks, I will help support anything you want to do. But let's get you into a place that you have a personal value to, and it doesn't look like I'm threatening you anymore.
I'm going to jump in there also.
I'm revving up. Go ahead.
Just, I try to be a humble person. I try to teach my kids to be humble.
You're the most humble person we know.
But thanks, Paul. I am a huge New England Patriots fan. My oldest son, his first name is Brady. People hate the Patriots. People hate the Patriots. And so that's how I'm going to answer the question.
I appreciate having another minute to put my thoughts together. Here's the thing. I think they're acting out of a good intent, and that's the good part I'll caveat all this with. The empathy that Paul talked about, I find it hard to find anymore. Because the things that I tried to bring to the position, like intellectual curiosity, learning about the things I don't understand, understanding why there may be differences and why those choices were made, doesn't exist. I'm not asked those questions. And when I have been asked those questions and I give the answer of why we've made certain choices, I'm told I'm wrong. The actions I see are the same actions that a good 04 does to make 05. They're saying, I don't know how to manage this, so I'm going to take all the things that look the same and put them in a group, and then say, now I've created efficiency, and I move forward. Without understanding the business processes or understanding why you would or would not make that choice. That is the flaw. And I don't know how you build that, because our promotion system creates people who are in the positions of leadership from inside the promotion system that thrive in the environment of the normal, of the traditional. KR was created because the normal and the traditional was failing when it comes to software modernization. So when the hypothesis is, we'll take this one group and we'll sprinkle their good behavior across the monolith of things that haven't worked for 3, 4, 5 decades, and that will fix the rest of it, that is a failed hypothesis. And I would say, give me one data point that shows that works. That's the problem. That is the basics of understanding the domain that you're making the decision in, the intellectual curiosity to learn something that you have not been exposed to, and to understand the actual hypothesis was the normal was broken, we need something different to fix it. has to be examined before you say take the difference and make it normal again.
Wow, I'm taking leeway. We're going longer because this is incredibly powerful.
Yeah, I want to wrap. I want to wrap.
Well, we got time still.
I want to wrap a few of those things.
Go for it. Go for it.
100% true.
Yeah.
Because the Patriots keep winning. Sure, they all have an ounce of truth to them. But again, I think our moment of humility here is, I know you don't mean this, but if we run around the room acting like we're always going to win the Super Bowl, right? There are a whole bunch of people that hate Tom Brady, for a number of different reasons. I think the guy's a great leader and a great winner. But even you're right, like finding that empathy is hard. But empathy doesn't necessarily mean that we agree and we perpetuate what's always been done. Right. It's just a little bit of space for like, I understand, how you're coming to the table. It doesn't change the fact that we need to change the way that we do business. Right. I mean, it's, again, back to the cool kids, comment that I made before is it's not right. It's just better. It's just different. And there's going to be someone else that's going to be better later on. And there's going to be some things that we do that aren't working out. Right. But if we put ourselves up on a pedestal here and we fight back dramatically, and we lose that empathy in that space, when things go wrong, because they will go wrong, the people who we need to stand up and be like, yeah, it's okay. I'm able to accept a little bit of this risk. Like, those people aren't going to be anywhere to be found. And I've lived this before. It is dramatically not fun. And it is, I've described it many times as holding the bag. I've had many friends walked out of a building. But you have to pick up the pieces. And you have to keep going. And they were walked out of a building because they fought too hard and argued principle to the death, and they won the battle, and they lost. And we can't find ourselves. I've tasted what sits at the other end of outcome, and like, fire lit, let's go. We've got to have just a little bit of space for even senior leaders. And we have to keep coming to the table. No doubt, sometimes we have to find a way around, right? And bust, no doubt. But that doesn't mean that it's always has to be the case. Oh, it doesn't mean it has to be.
So well said. How about we're going to get two more questions, and then we'll roll. I think there's a question over here in the corner, and then there's a question in the front row, Brad, and then we'll rock it.
Hi, I'm Mike Schwartz. I'm the founder and CEO of Glue, a software company based here in Austin. I had one comment and one question. My first comment was, don't beat yourself up too much about focusing on the little unimportant things. At Glue, we've been running this project for 12 years, and almost every day I have a conversation with developers about what's the impact of this thing that we're working on customers, and is this having the biggest impact, or is this something that's little? And every day almost I find ourselves working on like little stupid things that don't matter. So, and my question is, and this might not be a question because I might be returned with blank stares, but one of the things that I heard is that, we're trying to focus on outcomes, and there's a lot of bureaucracy and friction getting in the way of these outcomes, like procurements and contracts. And one of the things we've been looking at Glue is how we can maybe leverage Web3 business structures. There's a new business structure called decentralized autonomous organizations, which allow you to fund outcomes. And let's just say, DoD has a lot of budget, but there's a lot of friction in getting that budget to use. But maybe, is there any talk around maybe how we can use some of these alternative Web3 ideas to maybe fund outcomes directly?
The issue we'll run into, and I can hear my contracting people understand, whispered in my ear right now, is how can we verify everyone contributing to the project is a U.S. citizen and approved for access to the code and things. So when you have distributed organizations, there are all these other things that we have structure in place to address that won't fit. So it's not saying no, it's we need to figure out how do we answer that in a way that is responsive to the structure that is fundamentally different. Yeah. Great point. And I would love to bring that up with someone else. But yeah, we don't have a contract with CNCF. So that makes it okay, apparently. Yes. Yes.
Well, can I give an example? Is the intelligence community is wrestling with a similar construct right now around open source intelligence. And for the longest time, the intelligence community was like, how do I know that data is being curated appropriately? Like all of the questions that you would ask around just like all the stuff you find on the internets, right? And naturally so, but we are finding more and more and more that our ability to gather intelligence exists in social media of some random person taking a video in some location, and it's changing the calculus of like, okay, is this a deep fake? Is this like, and actually getting to the root of like being able to analyze that information. And essentially it's really turning our intelligence for like what is happening in those closed doors is essentially just crowdsourcing, and sure as heck beyond, US personnel. And that's just something they're wrestling with right now, and no different than from a contracting. Like the first thing I thought of was like, "Whew, is that an OTA? Like, well, how would one contract for that?" But it's then creating, and I would say for even the U.S. persons thing, okay, fine, great. Like U.S. person or not, like Marquise made, I keep calling out Josh Marquise. This guy's brilliant. But like Marquise made a point, like, man, I don't care who contributed that code. If I can see those lines of code and I can see what's going on, okay, fine. Can I create abstractions that actually enable us to like go and source skill sets and capabilities? Because if we talk about the fact that we have a talent shortage, we can't in the same sentence say that everything has to be US-based, CI or TS, whatever policy, all those crazy, like all of those barriers that we put in place, and then be like, where's the talent, right? Well, I agree. But the government is also a steward of the taxpayer dollar. And how do we ensure that buying an outcome actually delivers an outcome? There's a return on investment. I will be the first to tell you that our current practices waste millions and millions of dollars because we try, again, to presuppose the future. So we've already had that conversation around actually getting the value of the money that we spend. But again, things that we don't understand how we would leverage a DAO when it comes to buying an outcome.
I think we do buy outcomes, right? Like bug bounty is essentially buying an outcome.
Totes, yeah.
Yeah. So like we just have to find those little things where you say, you've already approved this. Can we just slam in a crowbar and wedge that wide open?
Well, that's why like most of my contracts are supply contracts, not services contracts, because I want to have that mentality of delivery and that it's a product that I'm going after, not just having a bunch of remote coders that are kind of sitting there.
There's this gentleman right in front.
Yep.
Thank you.
Hi. Hi, I'm James Cloninger, CEO of Motif in Alexandria, Virginia. We're a small, unconventional business. I've been to a lot of these kinds of forums, and I always hear, we need more of you. One time, I heard the speaker say, we're looking for two guys in a garage with a great idea. And I was like, do they need to have a TS? And they said, yes, they do.
That's a really secure garage.
Yeah, I know. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Have we talked to WeWork? They sell those now.
We're a little bigger than a garage, but just one thing I want to say before my question is I want to give kudos for you talking about warfighters as users. I think that's a change in mindset. But also, a lot of the people in the military that we work with are 14s and 15s. They've been in that role for 20 years. I don't see any incentive structure for them to do anything differently. I don't know the active duty side as well, but how can a small unconventional business work with 14s and 15s to affect change? What advice do you have for us?
It's hard.
Besides trying to be as creative as possibly can to make partnership.
Well, again, I think it goes back to what I was kind of saying earlier, like, and what you were just saying too. Like, this is the way that they've always done it, and they may not, like, helping maybe them see the value proposition, or for them personally, like, why would I want to use this? Not, because, like, again, if it looks like it's threatening to them or whatnot, or like, is it going to really make me do more work because I don't get paid any extra, to do anything differently? I definitely don't get paid extra to do anything differently. But is it, actually my deputy was really funny. He was like, it's actually, I make more money the less I work. Because, like, my salary's fixed and there's no incentive for me to work overtime. And so if I can, figure out a way to be lazy, and not, please don't construe that I'm saying that the civilian workforce, there's a lot of really, he works like a mad dog besides. So, but to that point, like, if there's a way to, like, help maybe get them to see the, bring a value to them kind of sort of thing. I don't know, yours.
I am. As the resident civilian on the station. To be honest, I don't know if I necessarily understand your question appropriately to give you an answer. And I'll take a swing. But, like, when you say, like, how do you make it easier for a company to work with 14s and 15s, I don't think you're necessarily being specific about DS personnel. I think you're being more specific of how does a small in a garage capability get into the actual hands of the people who want to use it, give you feedback, grow that value. I think that's really where your question is. And to a degree, from let's say a few different things. From an acquisitions perspective, far too often we'll say, we want this amazing, great, wonderful thing of all of these things and great things that looks and does all these great things. But the way that we compete that, the evaluation criteria and all those things, perpetuates typically a big, with a whole bunch of partnerships and a whole bunch of friends and a whole bunch of people, because it's got typically to be of this big full stack, wonderful, amazing thing. And rarely do we have modular components where we say, I'm looking for this service and capability to plug into an open ecosystem. And I'm going to compete you and evaluate you on your ability to just be amazing badasses is doing it. Which to me levels the playing field. I don't really care where you're coming from or how you're coming from. What skill set, technology, capability do you have to differentiate that basically? And it's part of the reason why we structured stuff in the cloud side of the Army is, I've already got a way to buy cloud. I've already got a way to secure cloud. You don't have to worry about any of that ecosystem. How are you going to make an amazing solution for our warfighters within this domain in this business space? And when you write an acquisition that gets after that evaluation criteria, provides environments for people to demonstrate the capabilities that they actually have, you start to open up the aperture of who can actually compete and win. That being said, Nick Sinai made a point is the government shouldn't be buying startups, they should be buying scale-up. His intent in that comment is there are so many things and nuanced pieces when it comes to hooking into the DoD and the services and capabilities, how they have to be designed, all of the STIGs that have to be applied. Sometimes there's a maturity of a product that needs to be seen before it's actually usable and feedback can actually be derived. Otherwise, the only space in which you'll deploy a capability is a closed experimentation environment that no one operationally is using. And the feedback that you're going to get is going to be theoretical feedback of how we kind of work, but I'm not the actual worker. And so there are a number of companies out there to enable you to move out of that startup into that scale-up space to actually be consumable by the DoD. And I would argue in parallel, the DoD also has to find ways to open up the aperture to create, abstraction layers, if you will, and reduce the risk for the startup to actually be consumable in an operational sense within the DoD.
Yeah, because I'll definitely say in there too, like, when I get a lot of people that come with a very niche sort of thing, and it's a great, like, we have the solution for this piece of your pie, but either we're not abstracted that way for me to plug and play you, or I'm not ready for that tech yet because I'm even still trying to abstract, or I'm still trying to, like, get to the first level of pain that I haven't gotten to the thing that you might be able to help me with, because I'm still just struggling with, like, bigger things until I get into that. It's not that saying that I don't want to use it or that it is just may not be great now. But I always store all of the people that come to me saying like, okay, now I am ready to ingest this kind of tech or to accelerate or automate this piece of my pie because we've gotten to a maturity to be able to do that too.
Well, that's a contractual perspective. Again, the cost schedule performance. Hey, there's this new technology you might be able to plug in and be able to solve your thing faster. Did I write scope for that? Is there money for that? How is it programmed and tagged for that? Like,
The requirement for that.
yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, oftentimes the way we're structured, we can't even tap into that capability. And so we talk about Mean Agile. I'll always pull out the Agile manifesto, read the second line. Like, we accept, changes or requirements even late in the development process. Like, what contract you see written in the DoD that's down for that, right? You're going to find the exception. You're not going to find the rule. And that closes the window and opportunity for capabilities.
We hear over time and time again, you got to keep the lights on, and then we'll try it. As long as you're keeping the lights on. So that means, waterfall at the same time as doing some fragile something.
Yeah, Beach made the point yesterday, right? Freeze the baseline on the old thing. No more money in that puppy. All that money is diverted to the new modernization thing. We need more leaders to make those decisions.
Super powerful, super powerful. I'm going to take the liberty and speak for a lot of people in the room and say, thank you for your service. That's not because that's used in our environment a lot. You watch a soldier or airman or anyone walk by in uniform in the airport, you say, thank you for your service. But thank you for your service in a way that you're creating a trail. You're a pioneer in software that makes the DoD and the world, quite frankly, it's a safer place. So thank you for your service. Thank you for a great panel. Fantastic.
Can I make a point on that?
Yeah, man.
Lewis and Clark took 2.5 years to get to the Pacific. Someone had to go and build the transcontinental railroad. Like, someone had to go do that hard. Someone had to dynamite in a mountain, right? So we have to create that community that's expecting that work is coming. That work is here. And that work will always be coming.
Amen to that. And thank you for your leadership. So thank you. Great round of applause.